Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Build a Configurator that Converts in 100 Lines of Code. I'm Dave Hawes, and I'm the Executive Director of Client Solutions here at ZeroLight. So my job is primarily working with our customers to help them understand which of our products might work best for solving their challenges that they might have. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Session's going to last around about 25 minutes. And at the bottom of your screen, you should see an option for questions. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in there. And if we get time at the end, we'll go through them then. And if not, we'll follow up with you afterwards on those. So just a little bit of background on what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be having a look at some code. So I'll walk you through that a little bit, and we'll be jumping between that and some examples of what that means in terms of building a configurator. So I've told you who I am. For this scenario today, what would I like to imagine that you are going to be doing? So we want to imagine that you're a ZeroLight customer, you're a web developer, and you have 150% digital twin of your product on the ZeroLight platform. So that means basically whatever CAD or whatever format that data might be in has been brought in and brought onto the ZeroLight platform and is ready to be rendered in real time. And you need to build a high performance configurator and integrate that into your website. So that's the scenario we're going to be walking through today. So what do I mean when I say a high performance configurators? So I'm talking about something with, like we're seeing here, with animations, with zooming, with full 3D, so you can view it with very high quality visuals, ray tracing, all the different configurations, trim, paint options if it was something like a vehicle like this, and being able to kind of freely move the camera around and have a look at that. So that's what we mean when we say a high performing configurator. So obviously when you go into the process of creating a high performing configurator like that, ultimately you've got to do that by building that with a team of web developers, and your team has finite resources. So what does that mean? That means you need to invest those resources strategically. So if you think about it, if you were opening up a brick and mortar store, you know your customers best, you know how you want to lay it out, you know what you want that customer experience to be for them coming in. You don't have to worry about kind of how to mix the cement and put the bricks together to build up your store. You want that to just be resolved for you. And that's what we're really here to do, is take that part of the challenge away so you can invest all of your efforts into doing the bits that you really know really well. So from that point of view, how do we go about doing that? We're going to do that by using the ZeroLight platform to build a functional configuration in around about 100 lines of code using two of our products, Palette SDK in conjunction with OmniStream. So Palette SDK is a JavaScript-based SDK, and OmniStream is for cloud streaming. So if you think about kind of the whole customer buying journey, going all the way through from someone getting awareness of a product to a product landing page, through to a configurator, through to maybe a digital takeaway, maybe a post-transaction reward, maybe a follow-up where you're bringing that customer kind of back into the buying cycle, or billboards or banner ads, or anywhere where you might be doing some kind of visualization. ZeroLight has a number of different products which can provide you with beautiful generated imagery of your product at all those different stages in the customer buying journey. But we're going to focus today on using Palette SDK and OmniStream for building the bit in the middle of that, in that kind of the CPQ portion of the configurator. So one thing I'd like to ask you about is what approach you would take when you was building your configurator. So I'm going to do a vanilla JavaScript demo today. We also have a React wrapper for our library. But I know you might be using Vue, you might be using Angular, you might be using something else. So if you can let us know, it's really helpful for us, because it just lets us have an idea where we should maybe be directing our efforts next in terms of wrappers for these things. So with that, maybe I'll just start to do a little bit of an orientation around the code itself. So I'm just going to have a look here. So I see from the poll results coming in here that React appears to be the most popular. That's good. We've got React wrapper available, as I said, but I see there are some others on there as well. So I'd love to hear what those others are. So hopefully you can see my code here. So just going to run through this quite quickly. We've got a nice style sheet, some jQuery, and importantly here, libzl. So that's a JavaScript library that you use in vanilla JavaScript to be able to use the Palette SDK. And we've got a couple of div tags here. Probably the most interesting one here is a stream container. I'll come back to that in a second. And then we've got some simple buttons here to do a connect and a disconnect to the system. So let's have a look at our setup. So we're going to create an instance of this libzl library. We're going to fill out some connection parameters. We're going to do our connection and set this up here. So let's have a look through what these parameters are. So we've got customer, in this case, it's ZeroLight. We've got environment. So in this case, I'm talking about kind of like a pre-live or a production or a staging environment, it's that kind of environment. We're going to be using HTTPS. For this particular demonstration, we're going to be working with Volkswagen ID4. So we set the model of our car to be an ID4, model year 2021 VW. We've got this client application code. This helps with analytics in the back end, and I'll talk a little bit about the analytics as we go. In this case, I'm just flagging up that this demo is a demo that's with my initials in, so I know any of the analytics are from my demo. And as I mentioned, here is this parent stream container. So as I said earlier on, there's this div tag here with the stream container attached on it. So what this is basically saying is the part of the screen we want to be taken over by the library is inside that div tag. We've got the modes we want to be working in, resolution, the camera we're going to start in, environment. In this case, we're talking about 3D environment. It's always a bit of a funny thing. It's very, very well established and understood from a kind of IT and cloud infrastructure standpoint that environment refers to things like pre-live staging production, and that and it's very well established in the 3D world that environment means the 3D background of the scene that we're working in. So we've then got some configuration options for the images we're going to bring through, and we've got this what we're calling our setup product codes. So this describes the configuration of the product itself. So each of these individual codes kind of refer to configuring an individual part of the product. So this might mean, say, red paint. This might mean 19-inch alloy wheels. This might mean contrast stitching on the seats. So for a mass market vehicle that has a high amount of configuration, like we're going to be looking at today, it might take 40 or 50 of these codes to fully correctly describe the product. But for a simpler product with less options, there might just be, say, 4 or 5 of these codes going in to describe it. So we're going to set the mode that we're looking at. We're going to set up this connection call, and we're going to add some event listeners for if there's any errors. A little stream ready event, so we can show ourselves a little loading bar that you'll be able to see, and then just registering our connect and disconnect functions. So that's the basic idea of the code. So let's have a look and see what that gives us. So if I jump over to the screen here, and then I do a connect, so you can see there we go. We've connected, and I've received an image. And at the minute, I've just got this basic turntable. So I can scroll around the vehicle and have a look at it, and there it is. We're up and running. But it wouldn't be much of a configurator if we couldn't do any configuration. So let's have a jump back to the code, and we will have a look at how we can do that. So I've got some snippets of code here that I'm going to gradually introduce as we work through this demo. So I'm going to start off by adding these vehicle configuration pieces here. So jump here, and underneath these buttons, I'm going to just add a couple more. So keep clear which block of code is which. Okay, so the interesting bit here, we're declaring a button, and when that button gets clicked, we're going to do zlbolt.setPR code, so set product codes. And you can see here, we're just passing in another one of these long strings of product code. So again, like I said, each one of these referring to some part of the configuration of the vehicle. So we're just calling set product codes, and that's going to configure the vehicle. So let me save this, jump across to our demo, and let's have a look. Okay, I've got these buttons in here. So now I've got these configuration buttons, and you can see as I'm configuring it, I've still got my turntable available, But as I'm going through, we're changing the paint colors, we're changing the wheel options. You might even be able to see a little bit from this angle that we're changing the interior options as well. So, okay, so that's nice. I can configure my product, and I can just jump between the buttons to do this. And I've still got my turntable. So the next thing that I want to do is be able to maybe look at the product from a few different angles. So I've got a few options here. I'm going to do this camera switches. So I'm going to grab these here, and a few more buttons. Again, just basic buttons that we're adding. And this time, the function we're going to use is this switch camera. So ZLBolt.switch camera. And we're going to pass kind of a default stage camera, a nice side left view, an exterior rear view, and we're going to add an interior view as well. Okay, so I'm just going to save that, jump across, refresh. Again, and I've still got my configurations in here. But now I've got this kind of more flat side view. I've got a nice rear view here, and I can jump to the interior as well. So hopefully you can see that okay. And from within the interior, again, I can still do this configuration. So as I jump between these different configuration options, you can see the interior is being adjusted as well. And I can jump back out to that default view and still kind of scroll around the vehicle through my turntable. Okay. So that's nice. What about some animations? So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to grab some animations. A little bit neater. So the important function here, again, we're adding some buttons, and this time ZLBolt.trigger animation, and I'm passing the name of the animation. So we've got door front left here, door front right, and so on. One thing to note about trigger animation that's a little bit different to the other functions we've been looking at so far. So with set PR codes or switch camera, those are just setting a particular state. So if you called switch camera on the exterior view, again and again and again, it's not going to do anything after the first time. The first time is just going to switch that camera and it's going to stay there. Trigger animation works a little bit differently. Trigger animation is a toggle. So when you call trigger animation, you're going to jump to the opposing state that's currently got. So if something is open, it will jump to closed. If it's closed, it will jump to open. There is a set animation option that allows you to kind of fix it at a particular end, but the common use case you normally want to kind of toggle back and forth between them. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. So I'm going to press this here. I'm going to connect. Okay, I've got my vehicle, got my configurations. It's all looking good. But I've got this here. I can now open the door. And then again, while the door's open, I can still jump through my different configs. Everything is still working as it was before. Maybe if I go to this rear view, maybe I want to open up the trunk and I can have a look at the space in the back of the vehicle here. So a couple of things to note here. So one of them, obviously, because we're dealing with 2D images currently, as I'm doing this, it's kind of jumping between the two different states, as I said. So we're jumping to showing an image of the last frame of the animation or from the first frame of the animation as we toggle it on and off. And everything else, again, still remains functional. I can still move around and look at the vehicle as I did before. The other thing that's worth thinking about here is we've got quite a lot of different kind of states going on at the minute, right? So we've got that configuration code that we have going on. We've got the camera that we're looking at it from. We've got the different states of all these different animations. Those could be together in different combinations of open and closed states. And what the library is doing is it's managing all of this for you. It's keeping track of all of this underneath. And then when the appropriate image is needed, it will go away and request that. So, and that will come straight from the CDN if it's available in the cache, or it will send it to the rendering service to render live if that's an image that hasn't already been requested. So one thing to keep in mind about all of that is that's really useful here, because for a configurator, I'm just wanting to interact with that state and see it go and request the particular image that I need. But there is also the Direct2D library, which is kind of built underneath this. And you can access that as well. And you can use that to control all of these states independently yourself, which can be useful for things like if you want to put thumbnails down the side or any other imagery you might supporting imagery you might want to put around the configurator. You can do that by requesting just specific images rather than kind of having this state that you're controlling. Okay, that's nice. But what else might we want to do with our configurator? So everything we've been looking at so far is kind of in this kind of nice neutral white studio environment, like say 3D environment background that we're looking at it in. But sometimes you want to view something in a more realistic kind of real world environment. So let me just grab this switch environment function here. I'm going to go and drop that in. There we go. And again, the function we're really interested in here is this ZLBolt.switch environment. So we've got switch environment call, and we're passing in here this white studio environment, and we've got this brick wall environment as well that we're going to take a look at. So let's save that, jump back over to our demo, refresh it. We're going to connect, and we've now got this new button here for looking at the brick wall. So I'm going to jump into this brick wall environment. So one of the things you might notice straight away, we've got this quite sort of this neutral lighting here. When I go into this brick wall environment, we've got the sun coming through. We've got these changes in the reflections, as I'm going past there. And it's a fully 3D environment. So as I'm moving around, obviously seeing different things in the background, and we're seeing these ray trace reflections as well in the side of the vehicle. And everything kind of works the same as it did before, right? So I can switch between these configs. I can open up the door. I can jump to the interior and see what it would like if I was sat in this particular environment. So again, basically everything is still exactly working as it was before, but I can just jump between this view with the kind of the white studio or into this kind of brick wall environment. Okay, so we've got our basic configurator built here, but what about taking it kind of to the next level, what we were showing in that intro there? So I want to connect to OmniStream now and give myself a 3D stream. So let's look and see what's involved with that. I'm going to add this function in here. Now this is going to call this connect function. And if we go and have a look at the connect function, we'll see the only thing we've changed is the mode. So in options.modes, we're now going to be passing 3D instead of earlier on in this connect, we were passing 2D. So we've changed one character, basically. We've changed a 2 to a 3. So let's go back through, refresh this, and we're going to connect. As I said, we've got these events hooked up for loading here. So it just gives us a little bit of this while we wait for it to come through. Now, on a real production environment, it's usually about 4 or 5 seconds. It can be much, much faster than that for it to come through. On a sandbox environment, depending on how it's provisioned, it might take a little bit longer. But hopefully you can see this now, and I can be moving around in full 3D. You might see a little bit of delay as this is kind of getting streamed to this machine and then streamed back out to you there. But this is that kind of full 3D OmniStream experience. So what can we do in here that we couldn't do before? So, well, first of all, you probably noticed already I can fly around to these kind of higher angles up here. So I've got more control, but also I can zoom in. So I can go in close and take a look at these headlights or any of these other details on the vehicle. I can also still do everything that I was doing before. So I can still go through my different configurations and enjoy kind of looking at those. I can jump between these different cameras. So I can go to the side camera, I can go to the rear camera, I can go and look at the interior. And I can still do the animations as well. So let's have a look here. Usually the thing I get wrong here is I forget which side of the car I'm looking at, and I click the button for the opposite side. But there we go. I've managed to do it for the one on the side we were looking at. So one thing you might notice there is, of course, now we're in 3D, so we're seeing this kind of continuous stream coming through. So rather than just jumping between the start and the end point, we actually get to see the animation play through, and we get to see that door kind of open. I can Let's jump to that rear view. Let's open the trunk here. And again, I can see the whole animation playing through, and I can see into the back of the vehicle. I can zoom in a bit here. Maybe I'm interested in my charge port. So let's open up the charge port, take a look at that, see what that looks like. Jump around these different places. And of course, I've still got my environment change as well. So I can jump from the white studio into this the brick wall environment we were looking at earlier. So let's jump to the side here, have a look around. And again, this is another occasion where you can kind of really see kind of that lighting working on the doors here. So as it's reacting to both the environment and what's that door left rear? There we go. Seeing that as well. So I'm going to jump to the interior in here. Have a look down. I'm going to open. Let's open up the doors here. Let's jump maybe into the studio. So one of the other things that you can do with something like this, especially if I open the right door as well here, I'm going to zoom right in, and I'm just looking at the detail here on. It's really useful for kind of showing the product details when I can take this, multi-million poly model, zoom right up close and look at it here. So I'm looking at this hex print here, and that looks quite nice. But maybe I'm thinking about an upgrade to these fancier seats here with this different kind of texture layout. I can zoom right in and see pretty much down to the individual stitching these details, because I've got that ability to zoom right in and render it at the full resolution that I am visualizing in here. And the other thing to point out that I think is quite useful about something like this is, as we've been going through this whole process, all of these things I've just shown there wasn't anything kind of extra needed from an integrator standpoint, right? Everything that we did, all the buttons we added to do the configuration, the buttons we added to switch camera, the buttons we added to trigger the animations, the buttons we added to switch environment, all of that is kind of informing the state. And when we went to 3D, everything still worked the same. We still had that full power of everything we'd done. Very small code change, just switch over to have that fully interactive 3D when we've built the configurator in this way. So that is more or less it for how we go about and build our configurator. I think where did we end up? 116. We tipped over the 100 lines a little bit there, but I think we did pretty well. Obviously, the next step for someone, if you've gotten to this stage, if you've gone through this process, you've downloaded the Palette SDK, done this integration, you've got something up and running, and you're going to need to integrate that into your website somewhere. So some people like to do this through creating an iframe. Some people are going to be integrating into a CMS or through some other system. So we'd be really interested to understand where it is exactly you would be integrating this for your use case. It's always super useful for us to know that, because it helps us in terms of determining whether, where we should build the next kind of integration point to kind of help do that. So I see Adobe is very popular, also Webflow, others. Again, if there's any others in there, please feel free to type in the chat and let us know what that is, because it's always interesting to see. Okay, so let's jump through a few frequently asked questions I think are good to cover off, because we see these come up time and again when we're going through Palette SDK. So probably the number one question that I get asked about this is, where do I get those product codes from? So a lot of our customers, when they've got kind of an enterprise system in place already for this, for their configure price quote setup, they might be using someone like an SAP or a configure or some other third party or a bespoke thing they've built for doing what we would call the rules, basically, and that will already produce a fully resolved correct product code string. One of the things we do as part of bringing the CAD data onto the platform, bringing the digital twin onto the ZeroLight platform, is we will work on making sure that all of those product codes are matching up with the real product code, so that they correctly match, so that we know that PQ55 means the red paint or whatever it might be. So in a lot of those cases, there'll already be a system in place that are just then integrating with and passing that to that set PR codes function. But for some of our customers where they don't have that already, we also offer a product called Palette Rules, which basically allows you to do all of that. So it'll allow you to enumerate the different options to help build up your user interface, and it will handle conflicts. So that's usually one of the main purposes of your rule system is, if someone goes to add a spoiler and that's not compatible for business or for production reasons with, say, the alloys they've selected, then it can go ahead and prompt the customer and say, what you've picked isn't valid, but here are some resolutions of things you can pick that would make it valid. So that's really the two cases. Either there'll be an existing solution in place that's producing these product code strings, or you'd be using our palette rules system. And in either case, the result that comes out of that is what you then pass into that set PR codes function. So second most popular question that we get asked: what animation cameras environments are available? Or how do I know what's available? So in the API documentation, we have a number of enumerate functions that let you ask for a list of animations, a list of cameras, or a list of environments. You can pass tags as well, so you can filter for things, say like, just give me the list of the interior cameras, things like that. And that allows you to build up that interface dynamically, and also kind of check which things are available. Another very popular question is, how can I track users' behaviors? So actually, with what we already showed you there today, we've already got kind of the basic tracking built in. So that is already going to track for a user's session kind of what configuration changes they made, what environments they looked at, what animations they triggered, what cameras they looked at, where they were doing camera interaction, how much camera interaction they were doing. All of that is tracked in an anonymous GDPR compliant way as part of this whole process. But we have another product called Palette Data. And with that, you can have API access through to look at that information and kind of understand what your customers are doing with the configurator without having to do any kind of augmentation or enhancement of the integration. Although if you do want to pass additional information, there are ways of doing that as well through the Palette Data SDK. And probably the next most common question we ask is, where should I use 2D versus where should I use 3D? So you always want to have 2D available. It's a great qualification tool to use early in the journey. It's also the case that someone could be somewhere where they have very poor bandwidth. So let's say less than maybe 4 megasecond, or someone who is using perhaps one of the few browsers or devices. We're pretty broadly compatible now, but there might still be the odd, I don't know, a PlayStation 2 booted with Linux or something and using some unusual browser. So you always need that 2D fallback, because pretty much every browser that since the year dot has supported 2D images. But the other reason is you want to think about kind of focusing your efforts on those important customers. So customers who have given buying signals, that might be the length of time they've spent on the site. It might be a number of interactions. It might be any other things they've been doing that shows that that's an interested customer. They're a qualified lead. Let's offer them the 3D experience, whether that's through a prompt or an automatic upgrade, and then take them through the 3D, and then ultimately deliver business value. When you see increased conversion rates, increased basket upsell, all of the things that we know 3D can deliver. So those are the most common questions that we get asked. Let me have a look and see what we've got here. Yeah, okay, we've got a few other questions coming through, so I'm gonna jump and have those in a sec. So where do you go from here? We'd love for you to follow and share our posts on LinkedIn. If you go and have a look on there, there's all sorts of information about our products, and you can find out about more webinars like this in the future. The other place I really recommend you go and have a look at is our developer resources page, where you can find out all kinds of information. I'll just have a quick jump over here and I'll show you it here. So you might recognize some of this code. You might have seen it just now. So the demo I've just run you through is pretty much exactly what you'd get if you went and had a look at this here. So you can pull this down and have a play around with it yourself, have a look through. You'll also, as I mentioned, there's a React wrapper and other features that we didn't get a chance to go into today, like, for example, having hotspots with animation. So this lets you have little hotspots on, say, like a door handle, to be able to kind of click on that in the stream and make the door open, other things like that. There's also this full API reference So you can look at all the different events that you can listen out for and all of the functions you can access. And there's that Direct2D bit I was mentioning before about letting you go in and do specific things. So yeah, please have a look at that, and you can find out all about our developer resources on our site. So let's have a little look and see what we've got here in terms of questions. So we have a question here. Is this entirely running from ZeroLight's tooling, or do you need to stream from another program, e.g. Unreal Engine's pixel streaming? So that's a really good question. The demo that I've shown you today is what we call our OmniStream Enterprise Plus solution. So with OmniStream Enterprise Plus, it's all completely ZeroLight tooling end to end, and we basically just need the CAD data that we bring onto the platform at the start, or a real-time model if you've got that ready. We can bring that in, and then all of the rendering service itself, all of the cloud provisioning, all the way through to the Palette SDK that we've been demoing today is all completely provided by ZeroLight, and it's provided as a fully managed service. However, if you are in a position where you're saying, actually, we've been working on our own Unreal or Unity or another 3D rendering solution that we are really happy with, that we want to make use of, and we actually just want help in terms of scaling that up so that I can serve thousands and thousands of users all around the world, and it's maybe that kind of cloud orchestration part that you're looking for help with, then we have our OmniStream Enterprise product, which lets you basically bring your own 3D renderer to the party, and you can still use kind of the rest of our tool chain, but you can bring your own rendering in. So hopefully that answers your question. I see we're just about running out of time here, so I think we're going to have to wrap up. One thing, just a reminder, we're going to send you through an email follow-up, which will contain some links, some of the links we've mentioned throughout this that you can go and have a look at, recording of this, so you can go back and watch it at your leisure. And there's also a little survey in there, which we'd really appreciate if you fill it out. It helps us understand whether we're doing the right things, giving the right content that's most informative to you. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me go on about this today. And I hope we can talk again soon in the future. Thank you.